You finally sit down to work. The room is quiet. Then, the person next to you starts chewing gum. A tiny, wet, repetitive snapping. Instantly, your chest gets tight, your jaw clenches. A massive spike of irrational rage floods your veins. You want to flip the desk. The world calls this being overly sensitive. Neuroscience calls it misophonia. It is a biological glitch where your brain misinterprets harmless background noise as an active, urgent threat. In this video, we are breaking down the science of why this happens, and I'm going to show you the hidden advantage of your unique wiring. This is not just about being annoyed. Annoyance is what you feel when you hit a red light. What you experience when you hear that specific trigger sound is a total bodily hijacking. It feels like an invasion of your personal space. Your muscles tense up instantly. Your heart rate accelerates. You find yourself gripping the edge of your desk, fighting a terrifying, overwhelming urge to either flee the room immediately or scream at the person making the noise. It is an intense, visceral reaction that makes you feel entirely out of control of your own body. You look around the room and nobody else seems to care. Your coworkers or family members are going about their day, completely unbothered by the rhythmic, agonizing sound happening just 3 feet away. This is exactly where the deep shame creeps in. You ask yourself silently, why am I like this? Am I just incredibly selfish? Why cannot I just be normal? You burn immense amounts of energy trying to mask your profound discomfort, forcing a polite smile while your internal dashboard flashes red. But here is the truth, backed by clinical literature. You are not too sensitive in some trivial, character flaw kind of way. What you are experiencing fits exactly into what clinicians describe as atypical sensory filtering. Your intense reaction is automatic and deeply ingrained. It feels wildly disproportionate because, objectively, the sound is very minor. But subjectively, your brain is treating that specific acoustic frequency as an urgent, in-your-face crisis that demands an immediate response. Before we dive into the exact neurology of your brain, if you have ever felt completely isolated by this, hit subscribe. Join a community of people who understand that you are not broken. You are just wired differently. Now, let us look at the mechanics. Misophonia translates to the hatred of sound, but that is a highly inaccurate name. It is not hatred. It is a severe autonomic nervous system hijacking. And to understand why it happens, it all begins with a process called sensory gating. Imagine your auditory system as an incredibly exclusive nightclub. The bouncer at the door is a neurological mechanism called sensory gating. In a neurotypical auditory system, this bouncer is phenomenal at its job. It takes one look at repetitive, irrelevant sensory input, like the hum of a refrigerator, distant traffic, or a coworker typing, and immediately suppresses it. It assigns those noises to the background, freeing up conscious attention for relevant signals. But in the misophonic brain, this bouncer is completely compromised. Certain specific sounds are simply not gated as background noise. They bypass the filter entirely. They strut right past the velvet rope and remain aggressively in the foreground of your conscious awareness. They repeatedly ping your attention, demanding to be noticed over and over again. Your brain completely fails to downrank the signal. It refuses to let the noise fade into the ambient environment like it does for everyone else. Neural circuits linking your hearing, your salience network, and your emotions drastically overreact to these triggers. They mark the sound of someone chewing as high priority, even when logic tells you it is trivial. This creates an agonizing mismatch. Your logical brain is screaming, "I know this is nothing," while your nervous system feels like it is under a physical attack. This unbearable internal friction is the defining characteristic of misophonia. You are fighting a war inside your own head. This is why you must understand that this is not you choosing to fixate on the sound. You are not being petty. Your filtering system is actively mistagging certain frequencies or acoustic patterns as vitally important. It is a biological reflex. Expecting someone with misophonia to just ignore a trigger sound is like expecting someone to just ignore the sensation of their hand resting on a hot stove. The body simply does not allow it. But there is a darker, more complex reason some of you react this intensely. Why does it feel like rage or panic rather than just mild distraction? The answer to that lies deep inside your temporal lobe. It is a tiny almond-shaped cluster of neurons that is secretly running your life. And once you understand what it is doing, you will never judge yourself for this reaction again. Because this sound is not just annoying you, it is actively hijacking your survival circuitry. Deep in your brain sits the amygdala. It is the core of your limbic system, acting as a highly sensitive radar dish that constantly scans your environment for danger. When the amygdala senses a threat, it does not ask for permission. It immediately activates your fight or flight response. In a neurotypical brain, this happens when a predator appears, or when a car swerves into your lane. But your amygdala has formed a unique, highly conditioned association with mundane sounds. Through a complex process of learning and neurological misfiring, your amygdala has linked specific auditory patterns to severe distress. When the trigger sound hits your eardrum, it bypasses logical evaluation completely. It goes straight to the threat center. The amygdala slams the panic button. This triggers an immediate, cascading autonomic response. Your blood pressure suddenly shifts, your heart rate accelerates. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline instantly flood your bloodstream. You are not imagining the profound physical toll of this reaction. You are experiencing the exact same physiological pattern of arousal as if someone had just walked up and shoved you hard in the chest. That intense urge you feel to either run out of the room, which is flight, or scream at the person to shut their mouth, which is fight, is a biologically appropriate response to a perceived life or death threat. Your nervous system is genuinely trying to protect you. This is exactly why attempts to just ignore it fail so miserably. You cannot outthink an amygdala hijacking. The sound keeps lighting up your threat system at a subconscious level. It is a bottom-up response. The sound enters your ear, triggers the ancient circuitry, and causes the reaction before your conscious mind even has a chance to intervene. Your top-down awareness, the rational voice saying, "This is silly," always arrives a few milliseconds too late to stop the surge. Over time, this biological glitch starts to dramatically warp your daily life. Because your brain deeply hates being caught off guard, it develops a layer of anticipatory anxiety. You start dreading shared family meals. You start mapping out escape routes in open-plan offices. You stop going to the movie theatres because you cannot control who sits next to you with a bucket of popcorn. You begin to brace yourself physically for the trigger sound before it even happens. The fear of the trigger becomes just as exhausting as the trigger itself. You are living in a state of perpetual vigilance. Your brain is dedicating massive amounts of background processing power to scanning the room, making sure nobody is pulling out a bag of chips or a pack of gum. This chronic hypervigilance drains your daily energy reserves, leaving you fatigued, irritable, and feeling fundamentally misunderstood by the people closest to you. But here's where it gets strange. Why is it only specific sounds? Why does the deafening roar of a passing ambulance or the massive bass at a concert not bother you at all, but a quiet sniffle makes you want to tear your hair out? The world assumes that if you hate noise, you should hate all noise. But science tells a completely different story. This is not just about human hearing. It is about how you process meaning, pattern, and psychological intent. Misophonia is highly, aggressively selective. The vast majority of triggers are soft, repetitive, human-generated sounds. Chewing, breathing, clearing the throat, whispering, or mechanical clicks like tapping a keyboard. Objectively loud sounds rarely trigger the misophonic rage. This selectivity is the smoking gun. It proves that this is not a mechanical defect in your eardrum. It is a highly sophisticated software issue deeply embedded in your brain's salience network. The salience network is the part of your brain responsible for deciding what deserves your absolute attention. It operates like a neurological highlighter. At some point in your life, your salience network learned that these particular acoustic patterns are hyper important. It highlighted them in neon yellow, and now it refuses to erase that highlight. It flags these micro sounds as critical data points that must be analysed immediately, regardless of what else you are doing. Over time, this highlighting is strengthened through a brutal cycle of negative reinforcement. Every single time you hear the chewing, you feel intense stress. That spike of stress confirms to the brain that the sound is indeed dangerous. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The body reacts strongly, so the brain updates its predictive model to say, "Wow, that sound really caused a crisis. We need to be even more alert for it next time to protect ourselves." Your nervous system has effectively overlearned the importance of these micro sounds. You are an acoustic perfectionist trapped in a noisy, messy world. Your reaction is not random, and it is certainly not an overreaction in the biological sense. It is highly calculated. Your nervous system is executing a flawless defensive maneuver. It is just executing it against the wrong target. You are fully functioning, but operating on an outdated survival script. The medical world often misdiagnoses this. They try to put you in boxes that do not actually fit your lived experience. The world wants you to fix this by treating it like a standard hearing issue. I am going to tell you to double down on understanding exactly what makes you different. Let us take a moment to clearly separate your experience from other conditions, because knowing exactly what you are fighting is the first step to taking your life back. What you have is not hyperacusis. Hyperacusis is an increased physical sensitivity to volume itself. For someone with hyperacusis, everyday sounds actually feel uncomfortably loud or physically painful to the ear structures. A dropping plate might cause literal ear pain. But for you, the volume is completely fine. It is the emotional rage, the disgust, and the profound panic tied to specific, often quiet triggers that define your daily struggle. It is not about decibels. It is also not general sensory overload. Sensory overload happens when there are too many competing stimuli at once. Bright fluorescent lights, chaotic movement, heavily layered conversations. The brain simply cannot process the massive bandwidth of data. But misophonia can strike in a perfectly calm, beautifully lit, deeply serene room. All it takes is one person sitting quietly in the corner eating an apple. One single sound profile is enough to collapse your peace. And finally, it is not general noise intolerance. Plenty of people dislike loud, annoying, or obnoxious noises. But if a neurotypical person hears a loud eater, they might roll their eyes and think, "How rude." They do not experience a massive spike in blood pressure. They do not feel an intense, localized heat in their chest. They do not have to leave the room to avoid screaming. That visceral, physiological gap is what puts you squarely in the territory of misophonia. The world tells you to fix this. They tell you to get therapy, wear earplugs, and stop being so demanding of the people around you. But what if this neurological quirk was never a disease at all? What if, for most of human history, this exact sensory profile was the ultimate survival tool? I want you to look at this from a completely different angle. Let us talk about the evolutionary theory of the night watchman and why your brain is actually a masterpiece. From an evolutionary perspective, human beings survived by living in tribes, and a tribe is only as strong as its collective ability to detect threats before they strike in the dark. If every single person in the tribe had a high tolerance for background noise, if everyone could easily sleep through the rustling of leaves or a tiny shift in the wind, the entire tribe would be easily wiped out by predators. You absolutely need cognitive diversity to survive the wild. Nature demanded that some individuals be wired differently. It required people who possessed a drastically lower threshold for noticing anomalies. People who could not easily tune out a twig snapping in the dark, a subtle change in someone's breathing pattern, or an unusual repetitive sound. This hypervigilant nervous system acted as the tribe's early warning system. The evolutionary trade-off for this extreme vigilance was personal comfort. You sacrifice peace for safety. Your nervous system is currently running an ancient, highly specialized survival software. It features a lowered threshold for auditory patterns and a much stronger, faster coupling between those patterns and physiological arousal. In a modern office building, where the biggest daily threat is a passive-aggressive email, this software is a massive liability. But 10,000 years ago, in a small band of humans huddled around a fire, your brain kept everyone else alive. Society calls it a disorder, strictly because society is optimized for the average. The modern world is loud, crowded, and built for people whose sensory gates stay firmly shut. You are effectively a military-grade radar dish operating in a room full of static. You are not broken, you are just profoundly out of context. But this is where the story pivots again, because the same circuitry that makes a ticking clock feel like torture comes with real, undeniable strengths. This is not just a story about suffering. The world wants you to blunt your senses to fit in. I'm going to tell you to double down on what makes you different. Because the exact same neurological mechanism that refuses to filter out a chewing sound is secretly providing you with a high-performance advantage. Let us talk about high-resolution auditory awareness and why people with your brain profile often excel in ways that neurotypical people simply cannot match. Because your brain refuses to blur sounds into the background, you hear the world in stunning, uncompressed detail. You possess high-resolution auditory awareness. You pick up on subtle shifts in tone that pass right over everyone else's heads. You can literally hear the microscopic changes in someone's voice that signal hidden stress, deception, or profound fatigue. You can read the emotional temperature of a room just by listening to the cadence of the conversation. You are always the one who notices when a machine is starting to fail, long before it actually breaks down. You hear the faint drip of a pipe in the walls that saves the house from flooding. You hear the distant alarm that everyone else ignores. Your auditory scene analysis, which is the intricate way your brain parses complex, layered soundscapes, is exceptionally detailed. When directed correctly, this level of perception is an incredible, highly monetizable asset. In analytical and creative contexts, this high-resolution hearing is a literal superpower. It makes you an incredible audio engineer, a meticulous sound designer, or a brilliant musician. You catch micro-timing and tuning issues that literally do not exist to the neurotypical ear. You can tell when something in an environment is just slightly off before anyone else can articulate why. Your attention to fine detail makes you a natural, unshakable guardian of quality. The price you pay for this auditory superpower is steep. Your world-class pattern detector simply did not come with a built-in off switch for the mundane noises of daily life. You are essentially driving a Formula One car through a crowded supermarket. The engine is just too powerful for the environment. But once you realize that your extreme sensitivity is intrinsically linked to your high-resolution processing, the lingering shame finally begins to melt away. So, how do we fix it? The truth is, you do not. And anyone who tells you to just breathe through it fundamentally misunderstands your neurology. But there is a massive difference between being helpless and being strategic. Now that we know exactly how the misophonic brain operates, we can actively engineer your environment to protect your ancient nervous system. Let us look at the tactical ways to take back your peace without ever apologizing for who you are. First, you must completely abandon the idea that sheer willpower will save you. White-knuckling through a trigger only reinforces the trauma loop in your amygdala. You need aggressive environmental adjustments. This means weaponizing noise masking. Brown noise, pink noise, and active noise-cancelling headphones are not crutches. They are necessary accessibility tools for your specific neurological wiring. Use them unapologetically in open-plan spaces or on public transit. Second, we have to look at strategic seating and visual blocking. A massive, often ignored component of misophonia is actually visual. Seeing the person chew often compounds the auditory trigger, creating a devastating multisensory attack. Position your desk so you are not facing the habitual snackers. Put up physical barriers if possible. By cutting off the visual confirmation of the sound, you can often significantly lessen the intensity of the amygdala's response. Third, you must establish firm, non-apologetic communication boundaries with the people closest to you. You are not asking them to walk on eggshells. You are asking them for basic sensory accommodation in shared spaces. Frame it scientifically. Tell them, "My nervous system misinterprets certain sounds as threats. I cannot control the adrenaline spike, but I can control my environment." Take the emotion and the blame out of it. Make it strictly about biological reality. Finally, you need skills to downregulate your nervous system after a trigger inevitably hits. Because the top-down logical brain is too slow to stop the reaction, you must use bottom-up physiological tools to cool the system down. Deep, prolonged exhalations, cold exposure to the face, or intense short bursts of physical exertion can help burn off the sudden flood of cortisol and adrenaline. You have to speak the body's primitive language to turn off the biological alarm. You do not need to pretend your reaction is made up. You do not need to apologize for needing quiet. Your sensory system is simply wired differently. It is highly tuned, incredibly vigilant, and capable of processing the world with an astonishing level of detail. The intense friction you feel is just the clash between a hyper-optimized biological alarm system and a modern society that simply does not know how to be quiet, respectful, or mindful of sensory boundaries. The world demands that you adapt to its constant noise. It calls you difficult, high maintenance, or overly sensitive. But science calls you efficient. Science recognizes that your brain is performing exactly as it was beautifully designed to, under these specific parameters. The next time you feel that sudden spike of rage at the sound of a ticking clock or a clicking pen, remind yourself, you are not broken. You are just hearing the world in a resolution they cannot comprehend. If this breakdown finally gave a scientific name to the invisible war you have been fighting your whole life, then you are exactly where you belong. Subscribe to the channel. Continue discovering the deep evolutionary reasons behind your unique wiring. Share this video with that one person who never quite understood why you needed the room so perfectly quiet. You are not alone in this. And you are definitely not broken. Keep exploring your depth. I will see you next time.